Welcome to the Portland Real Estate Podcast, Oregon and Southwest Washington's #1 show for real estate news and information. Without further ado, here are your hosts and a couple of guys who, as busy realtors and successful brokerage owners, know a thing or two about real estate. Steve Nassar of Premier Property Group and Joe Fistolo of Soldera Properties.
Hey, guys.
Hey, we're excited to have you guys on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome back. Actually, Rob, this is not your first time. We just had you 6 months ago. There were some big changes with NAR, and you have a lot of wisdom and experience in the business. And so you shared a lot of your insights with us then. And I think maybe even on the air, we kind of had the idea for this show to talk a little bit about investing in real estate. And we wanted to get you on. And we also brought in Dirk Zeller, who's actually well known in Masters in Real Estate. He's quite active on there. Shares a lot of his insights and experience. And so, welcome to the show. My co-host Joe Fistolo is here with us. Welcome, Joe.
Hey, thanks. You know, I was thinking about this particular podcast. There's only like a couple things that everybody thinks about, but it's never ever covered. And this is a first for how to invest. I know there's a multiple different ways to invest. There's no right answer as long as you're making money. Some people do it commercial, multifamily, single family residence. There's all kinds of ways to passively get income for what we used to call mailbox money. And Steve corrected me earlier that there are no such thing as mailboxes and snail mail. It's all digital and wiring. But to have money at the end of the month without doing anything just from your investments. And we got two of the best guys here, Rob and Dirk, and they have been at it for a very long time, and which kind of leads to a little bit of history and credibility to our listeners. It may not be completely PC, but can you give our listeners an idea of how long you've been investing and maybe an idea of what you're holding at the moment, and if you prefer single family versus multifamily, and get as detailed as you want and as vague as you want.
If you want me to go first, I will. Welcome, everybody. Glad to be on Masters. I'm Dirk Zeller, CEO of Real Estate Champions, and grew up in the Portland metro area and cut my teeth in that area. I have all different types of real estate investment, from single family to small plexes to apartments to commercial. I have one commercial building, office. I'm invested in 4 different states, and most of my holdings are in Tucson, Arizona. And we can talk about investing out of state. And I know Rob has been investing out of state. So I'm delighted to be here, and delighted to be here with Rob. Rob's brilliant in terms of his investing strategy and knowledge. So great to be with you, Joe and Steve and Rob.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, guys, for having me again. And I was on 6 months ago when we were talking about these upcoming changes, and I guess we'll find out how accurate I was in about a month from now. But nonetheless, I've known Dirk a long time. As a matter of fact, when I started real estate in 1988 at the Stan Wiley Company in the Beaverton office, Dirk's brother was in my office.
Yes, he was.
That's how long I've been doing this.
And you were an agent too, right, Dirk?
Yeah, I was an agent in Portland from 89 to 2000, and I grew up in the Portland area. I got into real estate. Interest in real estate. My father was a dentist for 30 years across from Jesuit High School. And so I grew up in that area, and he owned a bunch of commercial properties between Art Lutz's building, if anybody remembers that, all the way to 91st Street on Beaverton Hillsdale Highway.
Awesome.
And I live about a stone's throw away from there, and Aaronmore in Brawley Hills area as well. So I know the area well. But yeah, so basically when I started there, I was actually a single dad raising a little boy on my own. And a couple of the older realtors that had been around a while said, Rob, you can make a lot of money selling real estate, but you'll make a lot more by investing in real estate. And that's where I started. I actually started buying a couple of duplexes and stuff from some of the agents in the office as they retired and needed the money. And 1031, self-directed exchanges, stuff like that, never stopped since.
And there's a lot of tax benefits to investing in real estate. That's probably the part that almost intrigues me the most. I mean, it's definitely there was a famous, I think it was a senator or politician years ago that said you'd have to be a genius to invest in real estate and pay very much in taxes. And it's very unique to us as real estate professionals who are designated as real estate professionals because we are able to write off everything, including the mortgage interest and the depreciation as well, if we are in that category, versus say like a doctor who their primary job is not real estate, but they buy on the side. I think isn't it once you cross the threshold of 51% of your time is dedicated to real estate, you're able to write off all the mortgage interest on all of them?
Well, you can write off all the mortgage interest whether you're a real estate agent or not. The big difference is what's called cost segregation, where you can take a very large one-time depreciation in the first year. And then obviously you can take the rest of the years as well, 27 and a half future years if it's what would be a residential, which is a 4-unit and under, 40 years if it's a commercial, if it's, more than that, or commercial office. But literally, you can take it against your earned income. That's the big difference for our agents and people. You can reduce your earned income through
dollar for dollar
through the depreciation. So as an example, because my tax accountant works with a lot of real estate agents, if you buy a $350,000 property, you could likely cost segregate $50,000 or $60,000 in year one off your income, your commission income. Which
just that one property.
Yeah, just that one property.
That's a lot of money to not pay taxes on. Yeah.
You add in, you're at the top of the tax bracket and you can take 60 grand deduction. It moves you into another tax bracket, saves you probably 20 grand in taxes. And if you did that every single year after year, you'd have a substantial opportunity. So you're correct, Steve, there's an added benefit for real estate agents to invest in real estate from a depreciation and income strategy.
Not to mention, we're in the front lines seeing opportunities. Now, for you guys, that might be different. And we're going to go into why you haven't maybe invested as much in our local area, especially you, Rob, who is a realtor right here in Portland Metro. And I'd love to hear your take on, why sometimes you might go see an opportunity and not jump on it as a rental. But go ahead, Rob, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to back up to what you were just talking about. I'm going to click over to my screen here, so excuse me from looking at this screen. So basically what we're talking about is commonly referred to as the realtor rule. And there's a publication, if anybody any viewers want to write this down, it's IRS publication 527, and it talks about the Internal Revenue Code 469 rule. And that's the part you need to know, 469 rule. And by the way, a lot of Dirk mentioned, go to a CPA that does realtors. That's what I do. The guy that I used has got hundreds of realtors. But the key things are that you must spend 750 hours a year in the business, or 5% or more of your time. And what the key is that the $25,000 loss exemption no longer applies. So that means you can write off your losses against earned income, as Dirk said. For an example, let's say Mary makes $200,000 as a realtor, but lost $50,000 on her rentals. She now has an adjusted gross income of $150,000. Well, what that really means in real life is that most all of the ones where I have mortgages still on are on 10-year mortgages, 15-year mortgages, and I'm losing my butt on them. But it doesn't really matter because I'm writing that off against my earned income from actually selling houses as a realtor. And so therefore, well, really, all the viewers on this call are helping me pay for my house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you appreciate that very much, don't you, Rob?
I do. I mean, I don't have apartments and commercial stuff like Dirk does, and you can tell because he has a much better camera than me. But just get in it. It works.
Why have you stuck to single family homes, Rob?
I've got single family homes. I also own quite a few duplexes and fourplexes, but I just have never branched out into the apartments. I think honestly, because at the time that I was making the most money to do that stuff, we were busy, taking care of 3 kids and then putting 3 kids through 6, 7, and 8 years worth of college and stuff like that. So the funds were kind of dedicated to that instead. But I will say one thing. We were talking about landlords, and I do think of myself as a housing provider. And I take a lot of pride in the properties that I've got and the tenants that I have. I have very little turnover. I give them Christmas presents, which is interesting coming from a Jewish guy, but nonetheless, taking care of my tenants.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. What percentage of your portfolio is in Portland Metro?
Oh, very few at this point. I've got a few here in Portland. I've got a couple of Lincoln City. I've got a few in the outskirts, Canby, Malino, places like that. But most everything else is in Palm Springs, California, and right now probably the majority are in Indianapolis, Indiana, although that's about
my
to change.
gosh. Yeah. Huh.
They just made a big change for their tax laws there, where now if you own an income property, the property taxes are double. So I'm selling those and going somewhere else.
Okay.
And what state has the best metrics for kind of a low entry price but gets pretty good rents, like Texas or Colorado? Or
Texas is okay, but the property taxes are real high in Texas. And so, real estate is one of those things. I mean, and as we go through this, I mean, Rob's done incredibly well, and he has a different strategy. He's more in single family than I am, and I'm in different states than he is, and I think what the viewers need to take away is the knowledge he's going to share and I'm going to share, but figuring out your risk tolerance, your local market knowledge, what you're comfortable with. I remember when I started to invest in Tucson, Arizona, and which is where a large bulk of my holdings are. My father thought I'd lost my mind because he was old school, and you got to be able to drive by it, you got to be able to work on it, you got to be able to fix it up, and put your own eyes on it. I mean, he literally thought I'd lost my mind. Now, fast forward 15 years later, because I started buying in Tucson in 2010, so the timing was pretty good. He's like, you play at a much higher level, Dirk, than I ever imagined playing in the real estate field. And it's true. And obviously that was an incredible statement for him to share with me as a son. You always are seeking your dad's approval. But, I think I would look, if I were doing something different out of area, I'd look at Alabama and Birmingham, in Huntsville. I think those areas are ripe for very good opportunity. There's opportunity in the South. Southwest is still good. Tucson, I'm building 5 4-plexes right now just as rentals in Tucson. There's still opportunity in this market that I believe in, but some of that is, hey, I got 82 rentals here in this market already, so I got to go. If I go to another market, I got to find property managers. I got to build a team again, and I don't really want to work that hard. So
I think you make a good point, Dirk. The mindset as far as doing this in the first place. I remember when I bought my first duplex, it was in Hillsborough, right off of Main Street, like 30 something years ago, and drove my wife by it. And she says, "Oh my gosh, I'd never live in that." And I said, "Well, the whole idea of owning that is so we never live in a place like that."
yeah.
But now when I think about what that duplex did and how I exchanged it, and now it's in $1 million rental in Rancho Mirage. So it's all relevant.
And Joan said the same thing to me when we started buying properties in Tucson. She was like, "Why are we buying this? I wouldn't live there." You're not supposed to live there. I mean, this is not, and we're predominantly in C to B minus neighborhoods. There's more cash flow in C plus, B minus neighborhoods than they are in A neighborhoods. Your cash on cash return is better. If you're doing investment into areas that are gentrifying and moving toward the B neighborhoods, you make more appreciation. But, the flip side is you might have some more tenant issues and challenges you have to deal with. Rob, from the discussions Rob and I have, he's more in the B neighborhoods, B plus. And there's nothing wrong with that either, everybody. I think this is a personal preference. And there are benefits to single family, and there are disadvantages to single family. There are benefits to duplexes through 4-plexes. There are disadvantages. I mean, there are pluses and minuses to both. And Joe, I've even created a chart of that. I'll have my assistant send that to you so you can put it on, the master's page if you'd like to. And we've really laid it all out where you can see the advantages and disadvantages of each, and then you pick what fits you best. For me, I predominantly invest in 2 through 4 plexes because the cost per unit is less than it is a single family. And the rent differential between like a 3-2 each side duplex as opposed to a 3-2 single family is maybe 9% difference in rent, but 30% difference per unit in acquisition cost.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm creating a spread right then and there from that acquisition, and I'm getting far more rent in revenue than I would in a single family paying the same amount of money or similar amount of money.
To help our listeners, I'm gonna kind of dumb this down a little bit because I'm totally following you, Dirk. So like if a duplex, and say a duplex is 800,000, right? And just for the kicks, you're basically getting each unit for 400,000, and the rent against that 400,000 is going to be far better than if you had gone and bought a single family home, which would probably be 600,000, right?
Right.
Maybe the SFR would be a little bit higher rent, but not that much higher that it's better than the other two. So they cash flow better.
$100 a month, $150 a month is about the difference. Again, and I'm speaking in Tucson terms, it may be 200, in another market, or 2.25, but it's still, you're still ahead. And then also, when you lose a tenant in a single family, guess what? You're feeding it.
Yeah.
When you lose a tenant in a duplex or 3-plex or 4-plex, you may be okay. In other words, you're not writing a check. You're not making money, but at least you're not writing a check. I'm not real big on writing a check. I don't like doing that. And I'm sure Rob would concur with that. He doesn't like writing a check either.
I hate it. And I agree with everything you're saying. And, I know that one of my tenants lives on a duplex or 4-plex. I've still got money coming in, and that keeps the warm and fuzzies going. And that is a problem on the single family. One of the other things I've looked at, and it's kind of interesting, before this show started, I mentioned that we just bought a luxury home and then did what was going to be $100,000 remodel, and we spent $425 updating it. And I've said to my wife, I'm like, God, we don't have the cash. She's like, sell a rental. I'm like, I'm not going to sell a rental. Those are for when we're old. And she says, we are old. It's like, oh yeah, that's what I bought them for. So, that's why we do this, right? Is so that when we're old, we've got some money, can live a wonderful retirement. But, the one thing about the houses that I'd always thought about, and I don't know if this is a right or wrong. I think Dirk is correct saying there is no right or wrong. The key is just do it. What's the old saying? Don't wait to buy real estate and wait, which I've always been by.
The best time to buy a house is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, I'm trying to speculate some of the questions they have, and I can only go off of the questions that I've been asked over the years. But, realtors are in the best position because you can buy something below market. If you don't take your commission, then, you're paying less. We can sell stuff above market because you don't take a commission. So you're actually netting more than, the average person. If somebody wanted to get into finding a rental, what are the things you specifically search for in whatever it is you're investing, be it single family or multifamily? There's probably some check boxes of what you like to see. What's kind of your schematic for that?
If I can just back up 1 second, so I was going to make a statement that ties into this well. When I was younger and in buying a lot of properties here in Portland, Oregon, I knew that the appreciation rate was really good. So if I was going to buy, say, a $500,000 house versus a $200,000 house, or you can't do it anymore, but back then you could, and everything went up 10%, I just made 50 grand versus 20 grand. So that's something to consider too. But for me, I prefer more middle-class neighborhoods or upper middle-class neighborhoods. That's my thing. I like to rent to families. It just works better. There's less turnover. I'm a big believer in 2 bedrooms or more in houses or duplexes and stuff, for the simple reason that 1 bedrooms or lofts are too transient. Dirk, do you agree with that too?
Absolutely.
Some people have a minimum of 3 bedrooms. So that's a question I get. You know, do you go for a 3-bedroom versus a 2-bedroom? But for you, it's more than just a loft or a 1-bedroom.
Well, the 3 bedrooms in my single family houses I prefer. And by the way, I bought it through 4 bedrooms, and I've taken the closet out of the 4th bedroom because you're allowed to rent to 2 people per room. And the wear and tear with 8 people running around a house is a lot more than 6 people running around a house.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
One other thing we were going to touch on, I'm going to bet that the appreciation on a single family home is more than the duplexes and triplexes. That is the trade-off. So,
absolutely.
So one cash flows better now, but the other goes up in value better later.
Absolutely correct, Steve. That is the trade-off. There's no doubt that you're going to have the potential of more appreciation and obviously quicker liquidation if you choose to sell it sometime in the future as a single family, because you have a broader audience to buy that particular product than if you have a duplex or 4-plex or 6-plex or 16-plex, whatever.
And a diversified mixed portfolio is not a bad way to go, where you have a good mix of both. Some that are helping it your cash flow, others that are appreciating greater over time, and you're spread across the spectrum.
And I agree with you, and I think a broad diversity of some of these different types gives you stability, just as you would diversify your stock portfolio, so to speak. It would be advantageous to diversify in some of these different niches. But I think you'll find a niche that you really like more than any others. And you'd have other people on here that would swear by apartments and that's all they'd buy. And, I just happen to like that 2 through 4 niche, and I like the options of that, both in cash flow and entry, but also in exit. I mean, you great. You go out and buy 100, unit apartment complex. One, it's going to take you a lot of time to raise that money or save that money. And the second thing is when you exit at the end, and obviously you can 1031 and do all that, but at some point in time, that is going to be a whopper big tax liability, as opposed to, Rob and myself both are more in this category. Hey, we can sell a single family here, we can sell a duplex there, we can, if we want to exit and raise cash, we can do it incrementally over years.
Yeah.
Or we can sell it on a contract and get out of tenants and toilets and just be getting mailbox money. And I'll use that term, right? In terms of it. But, get rid of the nasty part of real estate investment ownership and keep the best part, which is the residual income.
And the contracts interest, the carrying paper, that interest offsets your gains and you pay it yearly versus all at once. So that's correct. Kind of a smart strategy as well. And
now it's a little bit more favorable that the interest rates are up right now. I mean, pro tip, everybody, there's a lot of people that have been holding on to their investment property, and quite frankly, they're older, they're tired of it, but they don't know what to do. They don't understand selling it on a contract. A good real estate agent talking with them about it, laying the numbers out. I mean, you could convince a lot of people to sell on a contract in today's age, not when the interest rates are 3.5, but now that they're 7, and for investor money, it's 8, 8.5. I mean, quite frankly, selling a contract would be the best way to sell for an investor in today's marketplace that wants ongoing income. Just a thought for all you realtors out there.
Dirk, on some of my hard money loans, because I do hard money loans out of my self-directed retirement account, which, by the way, we need to talk about, I'm getting 12% right now. I mean, that's crazy stuff with security. One of the things I did want to talk about, though, is I don't think it matters so much what you buy. It's what you're comfortable buying, like Dirk said, but paying it down. And that's the one thing that I did right by stupidly falling into this. What I mean by that is, let's say years ago, I bought a place that's $1,000 a month mortgage payment, and my rent was $1,200 a month. And then next year, I raised my rent to $1,300 a month. I took that extra $100 and applied it to the mortgage of the lowest mortgage of any of my rentals. And then poof, after a while, I paid off a rental. Well, then I applied that mortgage payment plus my future rent increases from all of my rents to paying off the next mortgage and the next mortgage and the next mortgage. And a case in point, we bought a place in Lincoln City right on the beach, a short-term rental. It's been a wonderful property, by the way. And we paid it off last week after 2.5 years by simply applying that theory and just paying everything down and paying everything down. And when you've got stuff paid down, it opens up so many doors as far as your opportunities to either borrow against those again, to pounce on something else or whatever. But that's the key. And I think that's the part that a lot of people miss, is just get these things paid off or paid down where you can use them for others.
If I can jump in here, everybody, and this is what's so great. Rob is extremely successful in what he's done, and he's got brilliant advice. I would be the polar opposite of that. Until I've reached my financial goals and the number of doors I want, the number of properties I want, I didn't pay off anything on an accelerated basis. I used the cash flow to acquire more. And there's not a right or wrong here. There's a what are you comfortable with? Because Rob's philosophy was actually a philosophy my dad gave me years ago, and he was very successful in doing it, and he and my mother did not like that, et cetera, et cetera. I'm okay with it, provided obviously it covers cash flow and provides a return. And so I think there's not a right or wrong here. There's what is your level of comfort, risk tolerance? What are you trying to build? What are you trying to achieve and get to? And what's your philosophy? And I would tell you, there's a whole lot of people that get into real estate investment that are, and I'm going to use a baseball analogy, that are standing at the plate waiting for the perfect pitch that they can just knock out of the park and admire the towering home run. That hasn't been my philosophy, and I'm not saying that's the wrong philosophy. My philosophy has been, I'm going to hit a lot of singles and doubles, and in 10 years, they're going to look like a home run, like I just hit a tape measure shot right out of the box. Yeah. And so I have a lot of properties, and they've all turned in, and you know, I can tell you, I can count the number of home runs I've hit right out of the box on less than one hand.
My experience, Dirk, is most people who are successful do it the way you just described. It's very rare that somebody has that home run moment where it's one thing they did, whether real estate or not, is what makes or breaks them. It's usually just consistent,
right?
Singles and doubles, like you said.
But they get more accolades at the cocktail party from the home run. And some of them are more interested in the accolades at the cocktail party than getting to the end result and winning the game.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And Rob's more focused on winning the game. I'm more focused on winning the game. And it was a longer term game. But to me, it's about hitting singles and doubles.
Well, the leveraging has been, a strategy for years. You get your properties, you refinance them when you have some equity, and leverage. It really depends how big your brass balls are to do that, because if the market turns, you could be in a bad situation.
And that has happened in our recent lifetimes, right?
Well, and I'm not advocating pulling out cash, refinancing, pulling your cash back out, and then I haven't done that. I mean, I put 30% down on every property that I've ever bought with leverage. I haven't refinanced them, other than I refinanced a batch, obviously, a number of years ago when the rates dropped significantly. I put everything on 15-year mortgages at that point, and they're all between 3.5% and 4%, 4.25% interest. I mean, I'm not paying them down because if I pay them down and then I go buy something else, I'm going to buy it at 8% in terms of interest rate. I'm keeping those loans. And again, that's just my thinking. I'm not saying that's right for everybody, but I agree with you, Joe. I'm not doing the pull the cash out and leverage.
ATM machine.
Yeah. Nah. that's a loser's game. The economy is gonna change, and you're gonna get dumped. And we've seen that in the apartment complex market all over the U.S.
Yeah.
2007 to 2012, a lot of people who had large holdings went down to no holdings. And, I'm a little more conservative, I think, like Rob. And, it just depends what stomach you have for leveraging. And if you want to sleep at night and know that you're inflation proof and recession proof, that's kind of nice. And I did have one question, Rob, and that is, you would try and pay off the lowest balance property or the highest interest first?
The lowest balance. It's a whole mental thing.
Just to get rid of it, and then there's no payment at all.
Yeah, it's called a Dave Ramsey snowball thing. If you ever listen to the Dave Ramsey show, and it works. The whole mental thing, like, whoa, I've got this place paid off, and then the next one's quicker, and the next one's even quicker. One of the things I wanted to roll into, guys, and I don't know if now's the time, but it's incredibly important on this call, and that's self-directed retirement plans. Is it okay if we roll into that now?
Yeah, go for it.
Sure.
Dirk, do you want to take that, or I've got a cheat sheet? How about if I go through that and then you?
Oh, great. Start out with it. It's something you and I have in common that we really believe in. So great. Lead off.
As Dirk said, one of the things we have in common is we both own a lot of properties inside self-directed retirement accounts. And what's amazing about this, and I speak about this around the country, is if I'm in a group of 200 realtors and I ask who's familiar with them, there's only usually a half a dozen. And I would have to add to this, and Dirk would probably agree, is if you lined up 100 CPAs, there's probably only half a dozen of them that know about it, even though it's been around since 1974. And what that means, in my way of thinking of this, is simple. We're realtors. Hopefully we make money. Hopefully we invest our money. A lot of us don't, but a lot of us do. And you send it to, say, Charles Schwab or Prudential or whatever, and you hire some guy and he's investing it in Boeing and investing it in Nike and all that stuff. And that's all great. And neither Dirk or I are saying don't do that. You got to have a balanced portfolio. So I'm the first guy to say keep doing that. But who knows more about real estate than you do? So what if you can move that money and a tax-free rollover into an IRA company that you can then direct what it buys? And that's what's called a self-directed retirement plan. Now, there's a few things, and I'll go through this list and I'll let Dirk run with it. This is for self-employed taxpayers for the most part. You can buy real estate, but Rob, I don't have enough money to buy real estate in my retirement account. Well, you can actually partner with yourself. So Rob's retirement account and Rob, the person, can do it and buy a house together. But Rob, I don't want to do that. I want to borrow money. Well, you can actually get a non-recourse loan. There are companies that do what's called IRA loans. North American Savings Bank is one that I use out of Denver, where they'll lend you the money on to buy this new rental that you're buying in your self-directed retirement account. And there's no recourse, meaning if everything goes to hell in a handbasket like it did in 2010, they can take the house, but they can't take the rest of the account or your stuff. You can buy, you can fix, you can flip. There's there's deferred taxes. When I say no taxes, there's a word now called a Roth real estate millionaire. And that's if you've got a Roth. So let's say you buy a house for 100 grand out of your Roth, and you put another 100 grand into it to fix it up, and you sell it for 300 grand. That final 100 grand goes back in there tax-free. Or in my case, I don't have a Roth, it's deferred. So technically when I take it out, I pay taxes then. If you're having amazing years, you can use defined benefit programs, which I think is up to $240,000 a year. You can put into this tax-sheltered retirement account. There's a company that does it called the Entrust Group, which is what I like, which is the Entrust with an E group.com, www.theentrustgroup.com. But there's a few important things here, and then I'll stop. One is the best way to do it, in my opinion, and I'm not sure how Dirk does this, but I've got my IRA with Entrust. My IRA owns LLCs in different states. The LLCs own a bank account, and then I have what's called a checkbook IRA. So if Dirk called me today and said, Rob, I got this great little house in Tucson for $250,000 you wanted, I could literally write him a check today and buy that house out of a checkbook, even though it's out of my retirement account. Here's the negatives. I'll go hit those and I'll stop. No self-dealing. That means you can't rent it yourself. So I can't go buy a condo in Palm Springs or Maui and then go use it this winter. I can't rent it to myself, my kids, my parents, my in-laws, whatever. The IRA must pay for the repairs. So if I buy that, I got to have enough money left over that if I need to put a new roof on it, I've got to spend the money from the IRA or the LLC bank account to do that. The rents go into the IRA or LLC. They can't come to you directly. in certain cases, there's no managing yourself. There's some various rules around that. You can't pay yourself a commission. So if Dirk says, Rob, here's this little house, you want to buy it, and he's listed it, and I'm going to get 2.5%, let's say, for selling it to myself, I can't do that. So I got to knock that off the price. And one of the things that an agent in my office actually learned is if you're going to do an LLC and then move all the money into a bank account, don't empty the actual retirement account. He had about $600,000, moved it into the self-directed IRA, out of the self-directed IRA into the LLC bank account. And then there's like a $395 a year fee to keep the IRA open. He didn't pay it. They closed the account, and the IRS came to him looking for all $600,000.
Oh my God.
I'm not sure how that ended, actually. I'd love to find out.
I'm sure not well, unfortunately for him.
But this has just been a phenomenal thing for me because basically all of my rents go in there. I don't pay taxes on it and so on. Dirk, all yours.
Oh gosh, great setup, Rob. It is the cat's meow, everybody. Self-directed retirement account investing. I have decided, or it was painfully obvious to me in 2008, after losing half of my retirement in 2000 and then again in 2008, that I was utterly inept at selecting financial planners and stocks. So that's when I got into SDRA, investing in real estate. And my thinking at that point, I mean, I was philosophical the first time around, and understand, I was very disciplined about fully funding my retirement account, my wife's retirement account every single year from about the second year I was in real estate all through up until, well, even present. But 2000 was a major hit that I was philosophical about. Okay, these things happen. 2008, I was torqued. I was mad, mostly at myself for just handing my money over to some expert and then losing half twice. So my philosophy at that point was, hey, I'm going all into this self-directed retirement account investing in real estate. And if I blow it up and I'm broke later in life, I'll only have myself to blame. But I'm okay with that. And it has been one of the most consequential investment decisions that I have ever made. And as Rob described, the rents go back in, you're not paying tax on them. Obviously, if it's a traditional account, you're going to be forced to take RMDs sometime in the future, 72, 74, whatever it moves to based on your age. But up until that point, it's all tax deferred. And if it's a Roth, the Roth is the absolute ultimate in the account. And I'm doing this to give context, everybody. And Rob is exactly right. There are lenders out there that will loan you funds to go with your funds. If you don't want to do a deal half by your own personal funds and half with your retirement account funds, go borrow the money from North American Savings Bank or First Midwest, or even a local bank. There are more local banks and local credit unions are more open to doing this today than they were a decade ago. That's what I found. But the Roth account, my friends, is unbelievable because you will be able to collect that rent and then pay whatever rent or assets out are to you for your whole entire lifetime, tax-free, plus 10 years of tax-free growth after you're gone to your kids. And they won't have to take it out in increments. They can take it out in one big lump sum, distribute the properties or sell all the properties, take all the money. And at the end of 10 years, and there will not be a dime in taxes that will be paid to the federal government or the state government ever. To give quick context, I have 9 duplexes and a 16-unit apartment in a Roth IRA. So do the math.
Yeah. And so inevitably, when we all take a dirt nap, it goes to your family with a step-up basis, right? So they
No, it goes to your family with the Secure Act, changed it. That's 10 years. There is no such thing as stepped up basis when it's in a retirement account.
Okay.
The only thing that they would pay in a Roth, they'd pay zero on anything. There'd be no stepped up basis. In a traditional, they would get to run it for 10 years, but they would have to pay tax on some of the distributions because it wasn't before tax when you put it right. It wasn't after tax like a Roth is. And for me, everybody, my best stuff has gone in my Roth over the last decade. I mean, if it was anything more than a double, I was figuring out how to stuff it in my Roth. And owner contracts that I got traditionally went into the Roth. I bought properties on borrowed and paid them off. I bought a duplex 2 years ago where I didn't have all the cash in the Roth, but I borrowed the money out of my traditional and put it in my Roth, the property in my Roth, and I'm now paying a mortgage to my traditional IRA. And the reason why is because I could have done it 50-50, but that means I would 50-50 the asset gain and I would 50-50 the cash flow. And it was cheaper to borrow the money from one to the other. And let me, again, personal philosophy doesn't mean that this is right for everybody. But my personal philosophy is the most expensive form of financing is partnerships. That's the most expensive form of financing.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're giving 50 away of the cash flow, 50% away, or whatever the amount is of the appreciation. And up until recently, borrowing money was a heck of a lot cheaper than giving away half of the deal. If I had to go do it all over again, and I'm in pretty solid shape, but if I had to do it all over again, I'd have a piece, the Roth own every single piece of what I owned. I have a coaching client in Florida. She just did a renovation flip with a builder client of hers, and they took 10% of the ownership in their Roth IRA, but they distributed 80% of the flip back into the Roth IRA because you can. And you may be thinking, and I understand probably this is a very advanced concept, but in an LLC, you do not have to distribute the profits of the LLC evenly to all members. That's not an IRS requirement. So if you're putting money into a deal, like your Roth is putting the money into a deal, it could put 10% in, but take 80% of the profit.
Interesting. I have two questions here. One is, after COVID and people reducing footprints and all that stuff, and I don't know your commercial holdings, but people are getting less office space, restaurants are going out of business. How is your commercial doing on the leases right now?
I have one commercial office building in Bend, Oregon. It's fully leased, and originally I bought it. And I bought it. People might get the impression that I haven't made any mistakes. Golly sakes, I've made tons of them, and this one was one of them. I mean, I bought it in July of 2007. You couldn't have timed that one worse in buying that. And, it went to half of its value, and I kept paying on it because my company needed commercial space. And so now its value is back up and it's doing fine and well. And I mean, everybody, you're going to look brilliant in 10 years investing in real estate. You just have to start doing it and then waiting the period of time for brilliance to arrive.
That's a good way to put it.
No matter how good or bad the deal, in 10 years, it's all good deals.
Right. I mean, I was an idiot for buying that. I mean, an idiot. But I would have been more of an idiot to hand it back to the bank because it was half the value, because then my credit would have been ruined. I wouldn't have been able to buy all these other properties on discount that I bought, over the years. So I held on to it. I toughed it out. And, now it's looking good. And it's, I've got 4 years left to pay on a mortgage on it. So, I'm going to be pretty bulletproof in a couple of years, even if it's tougher to rent. I've got 3 years left on one lease and 4 years left on the other.
I think the key here is just to do it and to buy a property. And I know some of our Portland people that are listening or watching, they're saying, "Oh, we can't do that here." And 2 weeks ago, I was visiting my son in San Antonio, Texas, and he took me to this hole in the wall outside. We ate outside in the sweaty, humid weather place to eat the best barbecue I've ever had in my life. And I was looking across the street, and KB Homes, which used to be Kaufman and Broad, said new homes. And I looked it up while I was waiting, and it said 1.8. And I thought, $1.8 million? Then I realized, no, that's $180,000 for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,300 square foot house. And now Texas, as Dirk alluded to earlier, the taxes on that were $6,300. So that doesn't make sense. But there are places around the country. You mentioned Birmingham. I'm looking there right now. There are houses you can buy, and I call it lower middle class, single family, detached, 1,300 square foot homes. Think 550 in a LOA. You're talking about 190, 220 with taxes under $1,000 a year and rents about 1,100. And the first question is like, well, why the heck wouldn't those tenants buy the house themselves? And I can't answer that question because I don't know. But there are places around the country where that sort of stuff makes sense. Dirk, I remember years ago, you told me that you like buying stuff in the South because they got brick walls and slabs, so nothing can go wrong, right?
Yeah. I like brick and concrete and tile floor. Swab it out, paint it, next tenant.
I have a question. Do you always fly to see a purchase?
No.
Your management team goes and sees it for you? Your property management team?
My realtor on the ground goes and sees it for me, runs the numbers. Property manager goes and looks at it. Home inspector looks at it very thoroughly. And, I run my numbers. If it meets the cash on cash return, I'm a buyer. I'm big on cash return. Obviously, I do internal rate of return. I do cap rate. But for me, the big one that of all the calculations that I like the best is cash on cash return. And so if it's at if it's a 11, 12% cash on cash return, I'm going to investigate it thoroughly and probably pull the trigger on it if it meets all the other amenities.
So it's fair to say you guys both have properties in your portfolios you've never seen.
I think I've actually seen all of mine now after the fact. I've gone and visited them, but probably 50% of them I never saw when I bought them.
Okay. Dirk?
Yeah, and I've seen all of them now, obviously, because we built a vacation, full-time home. Our residence is now in Tucson. But yeah, I've seen everything now. But before I bought it, no, I probably saw 5% of what I bought before.
Do you look for the bugaboos that we as realtors are programmed to be mindful of, like busy roads and bad floor plans and stuff? I mean, are you still looking through those lenses, even if the cash flows well?
Yeah. Deferred maintenance. I like some properties that have some challenges that I know I can solve and change quickly. So as an example, sometimes you'll buy a small multiplex where the water isn't separately metered or something is separately metered. We'll go in and put aftermarket meters in and then bill the tenants, but the calculations, you end up buying it cheaper because the cash flow is not as good, but you can change the cash flow pretty quickly for, less than $1,000 by adding some aftermarket meters and technology and get a great return.
Mm-hmm. Rob, you were going to say something?
Well, I was going to say something. One of the things my wife and I did for years before we bought a house just for ourselves was we had rentals in Palm Desert, California. Now, there's a rule when you own a rental property, you can't stay more than 14 nights a year. But if they're vacation rentals, like these were, by the way, we only did a minimum of 2 weeks. We could have done it for like a weekend, but there's just too much destruction of the property. We'd go down and stay there. And of course, if you're past your 14 days, then you're down there doing repairs, you're down there doing cleaning, you're down there doing all sorts of stuff. So you can actually stay longer than 14 days a year. So that's a good way to get into it. Buy something in a vacation market or a market you think you'd like to retire to 20 years down the road or something. The key is, again, I've said this before, just do it. Go and buy one. Figure out a place that makes sense and buy one. And even in the Portland area, I recently bought a cute little duplex in Malino on a well and a septic. So there's no water or sewer bills. And I think I paid just under 300. My rents are like 1,400 aside. I mean, that makes total sense.
Absolutely. That makes sense, Rob. Great buy. Good job.
I mean, that was a question and you answered it, Rob, but a lot of our listeners who, they're agents in the area, they have no rentals currently. They're probably thinking to themselves, what would you say to them? Like, I live here, I sell here, I can reduce the commission here, I can find a deal here. So what would you say to those people? I mean, about buying here in our market? I mean, because I don't think if someone's never bought a rental yet, I don't know if they're going to Alabama to do it. Their first time, right? Especially if this is their agent in this area. So what would you say to those people?
Well, my answer is it's totally okay to hand all of the money that you earn and put in your retirement account and give it to a guy at Charles Schwab. And I'm not knocking Charles Schwab and say, just invest it in whatever the heck you like. If you're okay with that, then why wouldn't you buy a rental property that, following Dirk's rules or my rules, that makes sense, whether it be Alabama or New York or wherever? It doesn't make any difference.
Meaning trust the process of somebody there like you would Charles Schwab.
Yes, and I have a great realtor in Indianapolis that I work with, for instance. I'm sure Dirk's got some great ones in the areas that he works with, and I trust them. And yes, I'm paying a commission, but I'm also getting a referral fee. Obviously, on the self-directed ones, we knock that off before we make the offer, and so on. But yeah, it's just an investment, and that's all that it is. And pay the darn thing down as much as you can, and then leverage that and buy two more, and then pay those down and leverage those and buy two more. At least that's the way I've done it.
Isn't it called a real estate investment trust? I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? If someone wanted to do this through some more institution,
I don't think they're going to gain knowledge of real estate investing in a REIT. That's my personal opinion. And in answer to kind of your question, Steve, then go do an investment in the local market or do two investments in the local market, cut your teeth and get into the game and learn the game, and then maybe go outside of the Portland Metroplex or into outlying areas. I mean, Oregon is not exactly a wonderful landlord-tenant law state.
No.
And Portland's even worse. And so, I mean,
Do you want to speak to that, Dirk, for our listeners?
I just, and again, everybody has their own strategy and things. I wouldn't want to deal with that. I mean, from an investment standpoint, Arizona, as an example, has very favorable landlord-tenant laws to the landlord. Tenant doesn't pay, I can get them out in 35 days.
Wow. Can't do that in Multnomah County.
Yeah. I mean, I just, it's not the best place. There are other places, but if you need to get in the game, get in the game. That's the most important thing. You got to get in the game. Rob's exactly right. Okay, you want to be wealthy? You own real estate. Use real estate, your real estate sales business as the avenue. I mean, one of the best pieces of advice I got from my dad when I was getting in the real estate industry, obviously eons ago, he was retiring as a dentist. I was starting my career in essence. He was ending his career. And he said to me, build your real estate business really well so it's a strong business. And the reason I have been successful in investing in real estate is because I could walk into any bank, and this was him talking, I could walk into any bank and get the money I needed to make a real estate investment because I had a great dental practice and I lived below my means.
There you go.
And he implored me to build my real estate business of listing and selling in the same manner so I could do that. And that's what I did. And obviously, we've gone on to other things in terms of the business sector, but that never left me. That the real issue is building a core business, living below your means, and being able to walk into any bank in the world and borrow the money you need to do this deal.
100%. I completely agree. The living below your means part is a big part of it too. You touched, Steve, on the REITs. The dangerous thing about a REIT is that you can't do 1031s in or out of them. There is something called a Delaware statutory trust, which is kind of like a REIT. And so if you do get tired of owning rentals, that is something you can 1031 exchange into a DST, which is like a REIT. They pay 6, 7, 8%, whatever it is per year, and there's management fees and so on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the idea of a REIT, and I was just floating that out there, is it's an institution or it's a way for you to just give the money and someone else is doing going to the Alabama, figuring that part out. Yeah.
Correct.
So the underlying theme here that I hear over and over again, subtly and not so subtly, is go friggin' buy one. Don't worry about the deal. Don't worry about finding the perfect thing. Just get one and hold on to it. And then when it builds enough equity, go get another one and rinse, repeat.
Yeah, it has to cash flow in my book. I'm not going to buy something that is a negative cash flow. That's me. I'm not saying that's right for everybody, but the numbers have to work. But whether it's a single or a double or a triple, or if you're waiting for the home run where you're going to buy the deal that has $1,000 in positive cash flow a month, and you've only put up $100,000, that doesn't exist in any market in the country.
Joe, there's people on this call, I'm sure, that are saying, and I'm glad you just said that, Dirk, that I don't have that $100,000. What do I do? And there's something called house hacking and stuff like that. I mean, buying houses on a VA loan if you've got it, living in it, then renting it and doing it again, or buying something on an FHA loan with 3.5% down, live there a couple of years, rent it, go buy another one. But to get to your point, you said, get some equity and buy another one. My theory has always been get the equity and buy two.
Yeah.
And again, house hacking is great. If you have to get a partner to get in the game, a money person, great. Do it because you're getting in the game.
Yeah.
My comment, a partnership is expensive, is the long-term view. I think you want to get out of that eventually and run your own show, so to speak, rather than, if you find a good flip, do the flip and use it as seed money, to get into the game of long-term ownership. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But again, flips get taxed at personal income levels. So it's not something, and again, I'm making a personal statement here. It's not something that I do a lot because I don't want to pay the tax on the personal income on top of my other income. I'd rather own the property and pay a little tax or zero tax because of depreciation over time and keep the asset. I've done a lot of renovate to rent deals and not many flip deals because, okay, I made $60,000 on the flip, but by the time I paid the state of Oregon, they're 10%. By the time I paid the Fed, they're 30 plus. By the time I paid 3.8% investment tax, half of my profit just went out in taxes. That doesn't make any sense to me unless I'm trying to get in the game. And it's perfectly fine if you're trying to get in the game, do it.
I agree with you 100%. And one other way we didn't talk about, and I just did this a month ago, a 24-year-old kid, I sold him a $600,000 duplex in Canby, actually. No, Sherwood, sorry. And he's living in one side and renting out the other for $2,500 a month. And he said, Rob, I'm going to call you in 2 years and do it again. That's a really clever way to do it because he bought it with minimum down because he's owner occupying the thing. And like Dirk said, he got into it.
Mm-hmm. Great advice there, guys.
I know every property is case specific, but I'm a little bit curious. So I know it's all about the overall deal. You want to get something good rents, get it for a good price, appreciating area that's up and coming. But when you're buying semi-locally an investment property and you're not building it yourself, do you kind of look for something that's turnkey, or do you look for something that might need our resources, our contractors that we can get for cheap, and the materials we can get at a discount? What do you prefer? Do you, when it's semi-local and you can control it, do you get that fixer and beef it up to rent, or are you really looking for everything that's been done already?
For me, it's the fixer and beef it up to rent, because if everything's done already, there's too much competition and then I'm overpaying for it. And I'm talking about single family because that's the most part what I do.
Yeah.
But that little fixer, it's difficult because people can't buy it. They don't have the money to fix it up, things like that. So that's where the opportunities are. There's a difference between fixing a house up to sell and fixing a house up to rent.
Yes.
It doesn't cost you as much money to fix a house up to rent.
For sure.
But as far as, alluding to that question and the earlier one that was connected, for me, everything that I look at, whether it be here or Indianapolis or Palm Springs or whatever, the first thought that goes to my mind is the world goes to hell in a handbasket like it did in 2008 and 2000, like Dirk talked about. And if I needed to get rid of this, can I get rid of it? And we've all sold houses every day where it's like, wow, this would be a really good one to sell if things go bad. And other ones like, this will be the last one to sell when things go bad. So I always look at it with that in mind.
Great thoughts, Rob. I would prefer a little hair on the frog, so to speak, because I'm going to get a discount and I've got a good team behind me that can go in and do what they need to do. And Rob's exactly correct. There's a difference between fixing it up to sell and fixing it up to rent, and it's less costly to do that. I do think one thing I learned, and I'm just sharing this, I think people overemphasize, the price that they're buying it for. I watched during the foreclosure years in buying and competing to get properties in those years. People that, the bank would put it on the market at X dollars. And I mean, it was a rocking deal at X dollars. And then investors would go in underneath that number. And I'm like, you're buying a house for $65,000 that's 4 years old, that's 1,400 square feet, that rents for $950 a month. I'll pay the bank $67,000 all day long and buy that property when everybody else is offering 63 or 62.
Sure.
I'm like, dude, the difference between getting it and not getting it, if you're walking away from a deal for $2,000 or $3,000, listen, it's the wrong deal.
Yeah.
You might as well just walk, period. We're all grinding over a couple of $1,000s on a deal. Give me a break. If it meets the numbers and it meets the pro forma, I'm a buyer. If it doesn't, I'm not going to force it. I'll go to the next one. There'll be another deal in 15 minutes. Deals are like buses. There'll be another one along.
That's a great attitude.
Yeah, I agree.
And I sent my son a couple of months ago. We weren't in Tucson yet to take pictures of all the properties because he was down here, and so he couldn't find one of the properties, and it was a duplex that I bought on the street. There was like 4 of them right in a row, and he finally found it. He called me and finally found it. It was one I bought a decade ago, and he said, "Well, I was confused." I said, "Yeah, well, here's the lesson for you, son. I bought that for $100,000 and the other 2 were available for $104,000 and I walked away from them because they were too much money." I was an idiot not to buy all of them.
Yeah.
That's where you accelerated ahead, Dirk. During those times where I wasn't making any money, I had 3 kids in college to pay for.
Idiot. Should have bought them all, but I didn't want to pay the extra $4,000.
And so you both have boots on the ground in different states of realtors who you entrust, who are looking for the next best deal, crunching the numbers and saying, "Hey, look at this. It performs well." They basically present it to you, the good stuff, to decide on. You're not combing, the internet for homes there.
Now, my guys know what I want. I mean, I like it back into green belts, parks, things like that. So yeah, they let me know when something comes up.
I have pretty extensive property searches set up, and I get properties quite a bit, a handful of times a day, and I will spend a couple of minutes looking at them myself, and I don't miss one. It's one of the things one of my guys has mentioned to me. He said, "You literally, of all the investors I work with, you look at every single one." And I said, "Yep, because I don't know which one's going to be good. And I'm going to do really quick number crunching very fast. And if it's either in or out, and okay, it's in, I'm going to explore it more and send it back to him and say, we need to do the legwork on this one." But you set up your searches, you set them up specifically, you set them up so they're very flagged, and you do the work real quick on every single one because you have no idea whether this is the one.
By the way, for people doing this that haven't done anything, we keep talking about Oregon, how bad it is. And I'll agree with Dirk on that, where I had one tenant that didn't pay me for 2 years during COVID while I had a $2,400 a month mortgage payment. So that one hurt. But there are places in Oregon that make sense. I've got a client who I just sold a couple of his properties, and he's buying in Lakeview, Oregon. I'm like, oh, what do you get in Lakeview? He's buying houses for like $125,000 right here in Oregon, in Lakeview. And renting.
Where's Lakeview, Rob? Where is
good question.
Way south.
Okay.
Harney County.
Nevada, California, where they all going to connect down there.
Okay.
And he's renting for around $1,000 a month. His taxes are cheap because they're cheap houses. And he's like, that makes total sense for him.
Do you guys do any Section 8 stuff with subsidy?
I've got a few Section 8 tenants. Don't do a lot of them, but Section 8 actually pays more money typically than the open market.
I've been burned on them where I've had tenants leave and then they only get 2 months worth of rent. One of them cost me $23,000 to fix it. So it's just personal experience made me scared.
Some markets is better than others, Joe. It's just market specific. And I don't do a lot of them, partially because a few years ago we had some problems with, you have to inspect every year. And so, there's an inspection that's got done every year. You have to do the repairs, and then there's a reinspection. And the reinspections were so backed up in the marketplace that it was like months. And we lost some rent because of it, even though it wasn't our fault. There wasn't a reinspect done on a timely basis. So since there wasn't a form clicked or a button clicked, they didn't pay the rent.
Mm-hmm. Rob, you kind of touched on a point that is worth talking about. I mean, there can be changes in the tide in an area where you go in. You mentioned how Indiana, you went in, you bought all this stuff, and now all of a sudden they've changed some tax laws. And so now you have to 1031 those into other states. I mean, how do you make out in a situation like that? Do you worry about that?
No, because I've always bought the right houses. Maybe I won't make as much money as I thought I would, but I'm doing fine. And I'm 1031ing, others are self-directed IRAs, so you don't have to worry about a 1031 in that case. But no, you just gotta take the house part out of it or the home part out of it and realize this is just an investment. And it's like any other investment, buy low, sell high. So buy as low as you can and sell as high as you can.
I think and I'm just interjecting again in personal views. I think if you're getting into the rental business for getting one or two rentals, you're probably better off maybe doing something else. I think there's an aspect of scale that you have to get to. I don't know where that is for any individual person, but there's an advantage of scale.
Sure.
And you have to get large enough, quote unquote, or to your financial independence goals at a significant level, with the people that I coach in terms of wealth. I mean, we literally break it down to, okay, for you and your cash flow needs and your independent financial needs based on the investments that you can make, here's the number of doors that you need to acquire. Here's the capital that's going to be needed to get there. I mean, we were literally create a plan and a process for somebody, a real estate agent, as an example, to get there. And they can see it, they understand it. And I think that was one of my inherited advantages. I mean, and obviously this is an old example, but I'm 32 years old and I'm figuring out how many properties I need in the Portland metro area based on the gross rents to give me X amount of dollars in terms of net operating income a month. And that's how I got on my, 80 rentals number. And that's been my number for 30 years that I've been working toward. Obviously rents have gone up since then. And so, I achieved what I wanted to achieve far before 80, but I wrote that number down, 30 years ago. And so that's why I wanted to get to that number.
I think it's interesting where we both are coming from different backgrounds, although similar backgrounds. My parents, for instance, made a lot of really bad financial decisions. We ended up moving all over the world, and they retired wealthy and lost it all, and did that 4 times. And so I was just scared stiff that I wasn't going to end up in that situation. And that's why I started buying a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dirk, is this what you coach on?
That and obviously business, real estate and teams. But yeah, my passion is to enable and teach and coach people to get wealth. If I coach you to sell 100 more houses, but you're still broke, I've failed.
Right.
Well, Dirk, you're selling yourself short. Some of the books that you've written, I mean, basically, if you're a new realtor and want to learn how to do this business, buy his books. They're all phenomenal.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you authored 11 books. Is that correct?
I have authored 11 books.
Well, I know there's a lot of real estate coaches out there, but this is fascinating that somebody could call you and say, "Hey, I want to start real estate investing," and then pick and can start drawing on your experience and knowledge in this specific, because there's a lot to this.
There is, and I didn't know it all when I started. I had an inherent leg up because, unlike Rob, my parents invested in real estate, and so I grew up. As a middle schooler, I'm doing tenant improvements and exterior painting and landscaping and all that from my father's commercial buildings all through college. It's also why I don't want to do anything with regard to my property and fixing it up myself, because I've been burned out of doing that. And my parents owned a duplex short-term rental that we've cleaned during the summer every Sunday before we headed home from Lincoln City in the 1970s. That was well before Airbnb and Vrbo. They were advertising it in their Oregonian, and we were cleaning it, and the next tenant would come in. But it's something I tease my dad about. He's 93 years old all the time. They owned an oceanfront duplex that the adjacent property was a state park.
Oh, God.
Oh, wow.
It's like, Dad, what were you thinking of selling that ever? Which he sold, in the late 70s. And I'm like, Jiminy, wish you owned that right now,
That's funny. Where would our listeners, well, a couple questions. What do you guys look for a cap rate, and what's your cash on cash percentage that you're kind of shooting for? And how would our listeners go about being able to calculate that themselves? Do you have like worksheets or websites or something to recommend?
Well, I mean, the Millionaire Real Estate Investor, Gary Keller's book, I think it's a really good book. I'm not shilling for Gary or KW, but I think it's a great book to start with and learning some of the calculations and investments. Frank Iannello, Iannello, has a book about all the real estate calculations. I would read that. And you find the one you like, meaning that cash on cash speaks to me. And that's my go-to, which doesn't mean I'm not doing cap rate and I'm not doing I'm doing it all. but that's the kind of the base. And if I can get something at 11, right in there, I started investing at a 15, and now it's moved down because there aren't any 15 cash on cash deals available anymore. But ultimately, my theory is if I can get 11 cash on cash return, and I factored in vacancy loss, I factored in repair reserves and maintenance, and I factored in a property management fee, a true cash on cash 11 based on debt service, I'm going to look real seriously at that property. And additionally, my theory is, where could I invest my money and get an 11?
I'm with you a lot on that. The only difference for me is that because I do single family, I can't see those kind of numbers. So what I'm looking for is to get it on the back end by choosing the right property that I know is going to appreciate more than others in the neighborhood. But as far as where to learn, that book is fantastic. One of my best friends, Ron Garber, was a co-writer of that book and owns a bunch of properties in Orange County, California. And the other thing, and I still continue to take these because you're always learning, is CRS has got some wonderful 1-day and 2-day investor classes. And that's probably the one that I'd recommend. But there's one point that I want to make, and I think this is really important. We keep talking about all of this as realtors, what we do. We need to know all of this for our clients. It always amazes me. When I speak about this, I was in Orlando a few weeks ago before I stopped on the way back in San Antonio to see my son. And I was speaking to about 300 people, and I said, hey, I'm going to buy a house in your market. I want it to be a rental, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Who can help me? And only like a third of the people put up their hands. I'm like, it doesn't make any difference, guys, if I'm buying it to live in it or buy it as a rental. So a lot of people think, oh, I can't work with investors. Investors are great. There's no emotions involved. Like Dirk just said, it either works or it doesn't work. It's just that simple. So learn this stuff. Once you've bought a rental and you've taken the classes, then you know the terminology, like what does penciling out, things like that mean. And then the CRS classes, fantastic. And then the IRA plans that we talked about earlier on that website that I told you, theentrustgroup.com or theentrustgroup.com, they've got all sorts of classes on there. I remember when I learned, I flew down to LA for a day and took a 1-day class on that. And I'd strongly advise you on that because your clients can do it too.
Yeah, Entrust has got some great classes on it, and Equity Trust also, equitytrust.com has great materials and information on it as well for SDRA. My other comment would be, there's a lot of business owners, small business owners, just like we are. I know, and I'd say this about Rob. Rob could sit down with a dental practice and convince them of the validity of self-directing their dental practice retirement account into real estate and get all those doctors and dentists as clients investing in real estate because he knows SDRA so well that and there's accountant practices and attorney practices. All of them could be investing in real estate, but they don't know that it exists. They don't know the benefits of it. And they're basically schlepping themselves down to the local Wells Fargo, Merrill Lynch office, blah, 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 and just, investing with them.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, hey guys, this has been a great show. We should probably start winding it down.
Sure.
Any final thoughts, Joe? Anything any other questions you had queued up to ask? This has been like a fire hose of a wealth of information.
It's a lot, and you can't possibly know it all in an hour and a half, but at least it could point people in the correct direction. And kind of the overwhelming theme is just go do it. And who cares if it's a great deal or not the best home run deal, grand slam deal. You win games on singles, right? The football teams win at getting, 3 yards a down. So just go get your first one, try and be smart about it, and then wait until you can turn it into, 2 more. So Is there anything that we left out? Anything that hasn't been covered that you guys think are important that the listeners should know?
I don't think so. No, I think we covered it all.
And I will just add to that, Joe. I mean, and it is a podcast. It will be in our podcasts for years to come. So people can come back to this, and maybe down the road they've bought that one. Come back to this show and listen to some of this stuff again, especially about the self-directed IRA. I mean, there was a lot that was said there that can be a lot to take in, but it might mean more down the road for them as they've started looking down those paths and making some phone calls. And then, by all means, reach out to Dirk and hire him as a coach if you really get serious about this. So I don't think you could go wrong there.
Yeah, I might have to buy a couple books.
Yeah, I would add to that. I know a lot of people that use Dirk, and I know I've got a friend of mine in South Carolina, Fort Mill, South Carolina, is one of the top agents in the area, and still always talks about Dirk and how wonderful he is, even though she doesn't need him per se to be a great agent. She does need him to be a better agent, and so he does a wonderful job for several people that I know.
Awesome.
Thank you, Joe.
Well, thank you both. You've been very generous with your time and your knowledge, and boy, this was awesome. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Portland Real Estate Podcast, Oregon and Washington's #1 show for cutting-edge real estate discussions. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to the members of Masters in Real Estate, a private and exclusive Facebook group, and the #1 source for all real estate topics. Thanks for being there, gang. I love you. Finally, I want to thank our faithful listeners. Without an audience, we're just two guys talking to each other. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so the new episodes automatically come to you. Make it great.